Thanks, Chris. Joining us to give their insight on the mayoral race and the upcoming runoff are Mays Jackson, political analyst for the Intelligence Group, Chris Roebling, Republican analyst and founder of ClearSpan Strategic, and Enrique Rodriguez, reporter and anchor for Univision Chicago. Hello and welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
The Chicagoans have spoken, at least some of them. 68% of registered voters stayed home, and of the people who did come out, almost 55% chose someone other than Rahm Emanuel at the polls on Tuesday. Mays, what message did they send?
I believe that they sent a message to the mayor that you need to come back down to Chicago. I think that the mayor has been labeled as a 1% mayor, and he has a significant personality problem in the community, and I think that it resonated with the voters this week. We saw it.
He had millions of dollars. We saw in Chris's piece. He had the incumbency, the endorsement, and a hug from the president and some very high-powered individuals. What went wrong for Mayor Emanuel? Chris, is it personality? Is it?
Well, I don't think he's the warmest personality in the world. I mean, I think that's pretty well understood. I think that he is he can be very off-putting, and I think that one might say that the way that he did the school closings with his personality and the underlying substance of the situation caused a very significant rift in the community, and I think the campaign against him really built out of that. I would point out that Mayor Emanuel is a pretty sober administrator, and he is dealing with both the spending binge of the Daley years and the tight resources that we have now. And I think that if he has been mayor, I agree with Mace, he's been labeled a 1%er. So if the class warfare rhetoric of Barack Obama has come back and actually engulfed Mayor Emanuel, that's an enormous irony.
How embarrassing is this for the mayor to be placed in a runoff election with Chuy Garcia? Frankly, most people in Chicago had never heard of Chuy Garcia 6 months ago.
Even though he's been at many different levels of government. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I had a chance to talk to the mayor during the press conference yesterday, and I asked him, I said, do you feel the need to be more humble? Because let's face it, 55% of the voters chose someone other than yourself. He didn't really answer my question. He said that he won 35 of the 50 wards, and that he needs to continue working very hard to win the trust of the people of Chicago.
You know,
so I mean, it's hard to say, but I think what went wrong for the mayor as well, it's Bob Fioretti. He did very well in this election, better than many people expected, and I think that's one of the main reasons why the mayor wasn't able to pull the victory out the first time around.
I would tend to agree with the Bob Fioretti component. I would say that the real surprise in this race would have been Willie Wilson, who entered, who came out as the third place finisher, and he jumped in with only a few weeks to even gather the 12,000 signatures. I think when we look back, that may have been the fatal mistake for the mayor as it related to this election. But I think that the mayor has another problem, and I've said this for a while, which is the mayor has a bunker type mentality, and he's come from a DC environment where he was at war with the other side. And so his job was to smash and destroy competition. Well, now in Chicago, you've got to govern, and we're not the enemy. And so when you get your victories and you get to do your touchdown dance, but you've done it with only one extra vote, you haven't really built a consensus in the city. And I think that what is really starting to show is a lack of connection with the city. And I don't know if it can be recouped over the next 6 weeks. And again, I think that this is, people talk about policy and all that good stuff. I truly and honestly believe this is going to come down to personality. I don't know too many people that read white papers, but I do know a lot of people that see that guy or know he hasn't been to their neighborhood, and I think it's starting to show.
I agree. I spoke to Jesus Garcia yesterday one-on-one. And I asked him, I said, look, everybody knows that you're a community leader. Nobody questions that. You work at different levels of government. Two things. Is the city ready for a Latino mayor? And is Chuy Garcia prepared enough to be the next mayor of the city of Chicago? Because Mayor Emanuel has, he's been the chief of staff for the president. He's been working in Washington. And you know what he told me? He said, well, he is an outsider. To be able to manage a city like Chicago, yes, you need that experience. But you also need to have local politics. You need to know your communities. You need to be able to understand where they're coming from. I think he has a valid point when it comes to that.
I think that the real contrast between these two, the real contrast has got to be understood to be the issue of the public employee unions. That is the ball game here. That is what is going on. That is what has animated Chuy Garcia. And Chuy Garcia is going to go for the next 6 weeks, and he is going to say, I'm going to make deals with the unions. There's going to be labor peace, and the prices are going to be very high. And then you can think about taxes behind that. How are we going to deal with any of the earlier profligate spending? No real answer from Chuy Garcia. Mayor Emanuel has got the very tough assignment now. I agree with what Mays said. He's got the tough assignment to say, look, it's hard to close 50 schools. It's hard to actually look at the financial statements and be responsible. But if we don't do that, we're going to end up as Detroit or Puerto Rico or Stockton, California, or just go down the list.
And he could have sold that story if all 50 schools that he closed were not in the African American community. So now here's the challenge that we have, and here's the dichotomy that's going on in the African American community. And I was commenting on this on WVON this morning. Will the African American community even vote for a Latino mayor? So Chuy Garcia has to walk a very fine line. They talk a lot about the Harold Washington legacy, but most people didn't live through that. So he's got those people.
I did.
Now,
Harold Washington did manage to have
I'm fascinated
brown
because
and black.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, he's got to walk a very fine line, because that line that he has to walk is if this becomes too Latino, and it becomes the Latino movement, then the black people are going to retract and go back. There is a presumed alliance that there is a black and brown alliance, but I'm here to tell you that on a day-to-day basis, it's not. Then the other interesting dynamic in this race is, how do you deal with the wards that are represented by white aldermen, but that are predominantly Latino, who weren't even on the team of the mayor? Do they look now and say, here is our chance to take the mayor out?
Right. The underlying aldermanics, and there are a lot of runoffs at the aldermanic level, okay, and those are going to be very significant in terms of allegiances. Whether 3 days ago the candidates may not have ever even imagined, and now they're being descended upon by either the Chuy Garcia forces or the mayor's forces, because everybody is going to be put onto one side or the other. So that's very important at the precinct level. But on the issue that Mays raises about the Harold Washington coalition, Harold Washington was a once-in-a-lifetime politician. There's no question. I disagreed with a lot of what he did, but he was a brilliant, brilliant politician. And he was able to keep Latinos. The question then was, would Latinos actually support an African American?
Well, see, but
and he did a phenomenal job. It is a very tall political order, and we're going to see if Chuy can pull that off.
That is going to be the challenge for Chuy Garcia, because he didn't do very well in the predominantly Latino wards. As a matter of fact, he got 8% less votes than Gary Chico and Miguel del Valle combined 4 years ago. Now, he's not winning this election without the African American vote. That's going to be key. And he did express to me his intentions of reaching out to Mr. Wilson and Mr. Walz. And I'm sure Mayor Emanuel is going to do the same thing.
Well, apparently there are reports that both Mayor Emanuel and Chuy Garcia did meet with Willie Wilson yesterday to try to court his support. So he has clearly become a very important figure, not only in this race, but in the runoff.
Well, here's the other part that I think that we are overstating the value of Willie Wilson. And first of all, this is not just meant to be a diss to Willie Wilson. I think that there is a level of frustration in the African American community as it related to Mayor Emanuel and his policies. Now, I am not the most politically correct person, so if the lineup is a Latino, 2 black guys, and 2 white guys, the angry black vote is going to go to the black guy, no matter how they feel about his language, his speech, whatever. And I'm going to say that Mayor Daley was not the captain of the English language as well. So I just want to make sure that we don't put so much emphasis on the endorsement of Willie Wilson, because Willie Wilson didn't control the votes.
That he doesn't have authority to transit those voters.
He's not going to tell any
Right.
of the, he may be able to influence the churches and the pastors, but that really only accounted for 10% of the vote.
This, I think, is a crucial distinction with the Harold Washington era, and not to live in the past, but, then Congressman Washington challenged local political leaders. He said, you want me to run? That's great. Now you go out and register 100,000 new voters. He said, you go out and I want to see, and I'm not talking about any ghosts, I want 100,000 real people registered. And he demanded that, and that started this enormous, I would say, tidal wave of support that built across the community. And the turnout figures yesterday break my heart. The turnout
so low.
I'm
Very
a former
low.
commissioner
Very
of
low.
elections, and it breaks my heart to see so few people participating
Why
in the
the
future.
apathy? Why the apathy?
Because people, in my mind, have, in a lot of cases, just given up on the whole process of government. They don't think that they're going to be able. I mean, even in that election yesterday, or 2 days ago, people thought Mayor Emanuel had it in the bag, so they didn't show up. And I would say that even in this election, the benefits of incumbency actually worked against the mayor, because I think that there was a much more vocal anybody but Rahm audience than there were the traditional guys that are going to get out. And the other thing I think you should just take a look at is, who now does the mayor go to get him over the hump? Everybody was already on his team. So he had every alderman, he had every
had the
bit of money,
president.
he had which again, but I think we've seen twice that we don't here in Illinois want the president to interfere in our local politics. He came and hugged Pat Quinn. Pat Quinn lost. He came and hugged Rahm Emanuel, and now Rahm Emanuel has the first runoff in the history. And you know, that's not blasphemy, but we here from Illinois and Chicago, we're familiar with the president. We know he's got to do his national deals, but we don't think he knows necessarily what's going on
You
here
mentioned
locally.
the turnout, and it was very disappointing to see that many people didn't get out to vote. Now, I have a feeling that might change for the runoff, because while I was covering election night on Jesus Garcia's campaign, I got the sense that there's some new excitement among Latino voters. And believe me, for us, every time elections come around, that's always a challenge. Are we doing enough to motivate the 17% Latinos that are registered to vote to really exercise their right? That is always a challenge. That is going to be a key for both Emanuel and Garcia as well.
And what we're trying to figure out in the black community is, if we give our support to Jesus Chuy Garcia, does that then eliminate the potential for there ever being another black mayor? And so those are all the challenges that are floating in our community right now as we make this decision.
Clearly, you mentioned Willie Wilson may not be the linchpin in all of this, but how important and crucial is the African American vote in this runoff?
I think it's very important. I mean, they represent 1/3 of the population in the city of Chicago. And without the African American vote, I do not believe Mayor Emanuel or Jesus Garcia can win. I mean, let's talk about the mayor. He got 16% less than he did 4 years ago with the African American vote. That was a surprise to me. And it's obvious that a lot of residents are unhappy with the closing of the schools and with all the issues that are going on in the city of Chicago.
But
I want to say that elections, especially in the 80s and the 90s, tended to bring forward sort of racial prejudices and fears in the city of Chicago. And they were something of a mirror that we would look at ourselves in. And that can be discomforting, okay? But I want to tell you that the condos and the bungalows, the condo belt is probably going to end up, it's a lot of Mayor Emanuel's former congressional district, northwest, southwest side. That's probably going to go for Mayor Emanuel. We know that the Hispanic wards are going to go, the Latino wards are going to go decidedly for Chuy Garcia. Now they have to, each one has got to shore up that, because we see Luis Gutierrez standing with Mayor Emanuel. So there's a little bit of work to do in their base. But then the winning coalition is over in the African American community. So right now, the African American community has everybody coming to it.
Well, and remember that the Latino community took Chuy Garcia out. So this is not the simplest race, because you got to put together a great coalition, because I don't think that there is still a tremendous amount of disdain for Mayor Emanuel in the African American community. But will that usurp our concerns? Because again, if you drive through the African American community and you drive through our neighborhoods, 80% of the people working, 90% of the people working are either white or Latino, even in our communities, whether it's a city job, whether it is working in a construction opportunity. So what we're looking at is, do we hand you the keys to the keys to the car and trust that you're going to be equitable in your distribution, or do we deal with the person that we know and then say, let's start all over?
There's a lot of moving parts here. Enrique, you're Mayor Emanuel. What do you need to do to win?
Well, I think he needs to change his approach. And I say this based on the feedback that I have received from all the people that I talk to on the streets, African American and Latinos. Many people feel he's not approachable. Many people feel he's forgotten about the communities, the neighborhoods. The mayor always talks about the 40% reduction in unemployment, but the reality is last year, 25% of African Americans were unemployed. The unemployment rate with the Latino community is very high as well. So he's going to have to, now that it's only him and Chuy, hopefully in the debates, he will be more specific in detail about what he's planning on doing to make sure that Latinos and African Americans get employment. Because let's face it, a lot of the jobs that have come to Chicago from the suburbs, many of those jobs are filled not by the unemployed citizens of the city, but maybe by workers who perhaps have connection to those kind of jobs. So that's going to be the key, whether him or Jesus Garcia can be specific enough and let everybody know how they're planning on changing the direction of the city.
Chris, you're Chuy Garcia. What do you have to do to beat Mayor Emanuel?
Chuy Garcia's got to get to a point of strong support in the Latino community, and that's embracing all of these points that have just been made. And he then has to pass the test that May's set. He's going to have to. I don't think he's going to spend a lot of time in the Condilo belt because he knows that they know that he represents higher taxes to pay for union contracts. So I think that's going to be the end for it. For that, he'll be going into the African American community.
I agree.
Anything to add?
I just think that both of them have a lot of work to do. And I think that really, again, it's not going to come down to policy. It's going to come down to personality.
I said we woke up and had a race. I don't think everybody was expecting. We woke up and we had a race, and this could end up being nationally significant.
It's internationally significant. Here you have the largest, the perceived to be one of the most powerful politicians in the whole entire world.
We've got to leave it at that. We're out of time. We'd like to thank Mays Jackson, Chris Roebling, and Enrique Rodriguez. Thank you for your time today.